Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:07. Thanks for joining us here on our morning extravaganza. Coming up at 6:35, Cal Thomas. At 7:05, Gordon Chang on South Korea. 7:35, Nick Minnock with some updates on Loudoun County. 8:05, Chuck Thies is going to give you all the details behind this Maryland power grab, trying to take D.C.'s Air National Guard in exchange for a vote on RFK Stadium. Why does this happen in Washington? And what does Maryland think they are at making demands like this? All right, we'll get into it. And by the way, doesn't that leave D.C. rather vulnerable? Here, D.C. doesn't need an Air National Guard now? All right, we'll get into all of that. 8:35, Mae Mailman, Director of Independent Women's Law Center, talk about the arguments today over transgender procedures. That's all coming up. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Morning, Julie.
Good morning. Good morning.
Now, we had an announcement of a designee for the incoming Trump administration withdraw his name from consideration. He is Florida Sheriff Chad Chronister. He was tapped to head up the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, and he has now withdrawn his name. He had come under quite a bit of scrutiny. Two major issues that appeared to be a big problem. Number one, he refused to cooperate with state officials and ICE over immigration policies, which sort of seems like a problem for somebody who wants to work in the Trump administration. Florida passed a law signed in 2023 targeted to stop illegal immigration. He said his office wouldn't engage in any immigration enforcement activities. And by the way, when you're at the DEA, you deal with a lot of illegal immigrants. You deal with a lot of immigration issues and foreign issues, things like that. But secondly, and probably even more concerning, he arrested a Florida pastor during the coronavirus pandemic for holding church services. Ugh. And my understanding at the time was that Florida state law actually allowed for those kinds of gatherings. I remember Governor DeSantis specifically saying, no, church service, we have no right to infringe on people's exercise of religion and faith. And he went ahead and put out an arrest warrant anyway. He was the sheriff, by the way, of Tampa County, I suppose. Is there a county of Tampa Bay? He's located. Oh, it's Hillsborough County. That includes Tampa Bay. The River at Tampa Bay Church held services one weekend in the pandemic. He put out a statement saying, "Last night I made the decision to seek an arrest warrant for the pastor of a local church who intentionally and repeatedly chose to disregard orders set in place by the president and the governor, the CDC, and the Hillsborough County Emergency Policy Group. His reckless disregard for human life put hundreds of people from his congregation at risk and thousands of residents who may interact with them this week." He called it an unlawful assembly and was booked on second-degree misdemeanors. Chronister said his office had direct contact with the church, telling it not to pack its pews. So those two decisions, not cooperating on immigration issues as recently as 2023, and then going ahead and arresting. This was March of 2020. This was just 2 weeks into the lockdown, arresting a pastor for holding church services. And you could argue, well, those were the rules of the time. That was the law at the time. Even Trump said you shouldn't be doing. Yeah, I know you could make that argument, but it still goes down to the judgment of the individual. Yeah. He's elected an official. He's the sheriff of the county. He could have done anything but arrest a man of the cloth, but he did.
And again, these are the, this is all within the scope of what you look at when you consider these nominees. Look, he made that decision. People can defend it, but now he's being considered for another position, and obviously there were some lapses in judgment. Yeah. I do find this interesting, though, that what's the vetting process? Because this seems pretty easy to find, and so I'm a little bit confused.
Glad you raised that. Glad you raised that, because I've noticed a pattern here in a lot of these nominees, and it actually dovetails into the story that we just had. It's like, Hegseth's under fire, so who's under consideration? Ron DeSantis. This guy for DEA, what is he? Well, he's a sheriff in a county in Florida. Everybody assumed that Rick Grinnell was the front runner for Secretary of State. Who got the job? Marco Rubio, a senator from, say it with me, Florida. If you look at this incoming cabinet, you will see it is very well represented by the Sunshine State. Now, many will argue, well, listen, I mean, over the last several years, there has been a migration of great conservative leaders going to the state of Florida because of various reasons, including the freedom to move about and live your life during the pandemic. Even Donald Trump himself has moved to Florida. So, the brain trust of conservative leadership that would populate a new incoming Trump administration is going to be sourced from Florida. That may be it. You're right. But let's not forget who the most powerful person, other than Donald Trump himself, is in this entire transition, and presumably in the new Trump White House when it takes power January 20th. That would be the chief of staff, Susie Wiles. Susie Wiles, incoming chief of staff, was also the campaign manager or director of the campaign. I don't know what the full title was, but she ran the campaign or was the co-chairman of the Trump campaign. She is a political strategist. She is based in Florida. She has operated in Florida her entire adult career as a political consultant and campaign manager. And I would argue if we started pulling on threads, each and every one of these Florida politicians who are now being tapped to fill powerful and important slots in the Trump administration all have ties to Susie Wiles. Susie Wiles, they're probably all her clients, or a good chunk of them are her clients. So when push comes to shove, if somebody's in the room making a compelling argument for one candidate over the other, Susie Wiles, it's only natural, she's going to defer to the people that she has a working relationship with. And when I say working a relationship, someone who has benefited from Susie Wiles' acumen as a campaign manager and political strategist. But it must be said, she has also benefited from being employed by those potential administration picks. So that's how politics works. And I'm guessing Donald Trump was not super duper plugged in on who the next head of DEA was going to be. I'm thinking the incoming president has a priority list for the departments of the incoming administration that are most important to him. DEA was probably, listen, just pick somebody good. And Susie Wiles comes in and says, well, we found this guy. He's the sheriff of Hillsborough County in Florida. Okay, sounds great. I'm betting you dollars to donuts that at some point this guy, when running for sheriff in Hillsborough County, also operated and worked with Susie Wiles. Susie Wiles is the center of this, and I think that needs some scrutiny right now.
Yeah, well, I do think that so far we have avoided the sort of Omarosas and some of the silliness that we saw during the first go around, and I think that it is an enormous job to place these cabinet positions. Of
course it is.
But yeah, I think you're right. The DEA nominee especially confuses me because, again, this is the stuff that rattles the base. The idea that you went after a preacher for allowing his congregation, exactly. I mean, that is so, that is going to make MAGA mad more than anything
Well, and I feel like there's this myopic perspective right now that, Florida is sort of the base of operations. And so, let's just keep it close to home here for political reasons and maybe for expedience. But, I'm sorry, I could name two. Looking for a sheriff to head up an agency in the Trump administration that's, tough on crime and tough on. I got Chuck Jenkins in Frederick, and I got Mike Chapin in Loudoun. These are guys who have lived in blue areas, blue states, and won their counties overwhelmingly for the last 4 election cycles. They're great sheriffs, and they don't even get consideration. Listen, I don't even know if Jenkins or Chapman want the jobs, and I don't want them to take a job because I want them right where they are. I'm just putting that out there as an example of this sort of tunnel vision that these guys have, the transition team has now in Florida. Hold that thought. We want to continue this in a moment. Real quickly, you wanted to say, as I was just saying, and again, listen, I recognize, trust me, I know the politics of this, and I know that us on O'Connor and Company on this morning show in Washington by saying, hey, what's going on with all these Florida picks? Maybe it's Susie Judge. She's the incoming chief of staff. I recognize that means we're not going to be invited to the White House Christmas party next year. I don't care. I don't care. It needs to be said.
Yeah, but look, I was just going to say that, and this is a friend of mine, but there was an acting administrator of the Drug Enforcement Agency, first Trump administration. That was Udom Dillon. He did an excellent job. This is a guy who prosecuted major narcotics cases in LA. He was a U.S. attorney. He was part of the Department of Justice's Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. This guy is qualified. Again, Udom Dillon, good friend of mine, but I would hope that they would, consider people that served well, so did a good job in the first administration.
I agree, 100%. All right. Meanwhile, later today, we're going to have these arguments in front of the Supreme Court. It has to do, you're going to hear all the media say that this is about transgender rights. And listen, people can frame stories however they would like. I don't quite understand how a person who has gender dysphoria or in some reason thinks that God made a mistake, which that's always my favorite part.
Yeah.
My favorite part is when people in the transgender universe say, well, sometimes God makes a mistake. No, I don't think you understand God in the same way that most of us understand God. Yeah. Human rights are human rights. And when you put when you truncate it, or add a modifier to it. Oh, no, these aren't human rights. These are transgender rights. So only specific people have specific rights, and apparently that right is to mutilate your own body and compel states to support it in one way or another. I don't know. That's a warped vision of what a right is. But Tennessee, based on their constitution and based on their process of discussing, debating, and voting on laws, saw fit to stop this barbaric activity of using chemicals and surgical procedures to mutilate perfectly healthy organs, sex organs, from children, on children. By the way, they have followed suit with the United Kingdom, with most countries in Scandinavia, and very soon most of Western Europe, in banning these procedures on children. These are procedures that you just heard Chloe Cole, who was a victim of this barbarism, in our studio talking about this yesterday. She has now resumed living life as a young woman. She's 20 years old. This process started for her before she was a teenager. The people of Tennessee says this ends and this ends now. But there are activists who have fought this all the way to the Supreme Court, and that's the argument that we'll hear later today. And I just want to remind you, at 8:35, May Mailman of Independent Women's Law Center will be giving us her legal perspective on this. But Julie, how do you think this is going to go today? It's obviously an incredibly emotional argument for a lot of people on both sides. We shouldn't cede ground on the emotion, because I get emotional thinking about it too.
This is being sort of cast as a transgender rights case. No, this is about child mutilation and genital mutilation, really harming children. This is they claim that, this is parents making decisions for their children and doctors with doctors' care. I'm sorry, but doctors and parents are not allowed to abuse children. They're not allowed to mutilate children. The idea that this has gotten to the Supreme Court, that common sense has not won out before now, is shocking to me. I really do hope the Supreme Court hears this and makes the right decision, because, again, this is not a transgender rights case. This is a child abuse case. This is a child mutilation case, and we need to start casting it in that way. That's
right. We keep hearing that this is a human rights issue. It's a equal protection under the law. They're arguing under the 14th Amendment about this. Let's just be clear. If you wanted to have this done to your child, surgically and chemically alter their perfectly healthy sexual organs for any reason other than to change their gender, you would be told, no, that's barbaric. You cannot do that. Let's just say, I don't want my daughter to grow up with breasts. She's going to live life as a woman. But here at the age of 13, I want to stop her from going through puberty, and I don't want her to have children. And when she starts developing breasts, I want those removed. And the doctor will say, well, is this because she's transgender? And no. It's just my decision. I just don't want her to do that. I'm ordering you as her parent to do this. They would arrest you for trying to do that to your child. So don't tell me this is an equal rights issue. In fact, it's quite the opposite. You're trying to carve out special rights for people who claim to have this, what I believe to be a psychological disorder. Now, the lawyer arguing this case for the ACLU was on CNN yesterday. This person lives life as a man, has a little beard and a mustache, dresses in a suit, goes by the name Chase Strangio, we believe this person was born a woman. You be the judge.
How do you plan to argue before the U.S. Supreme Court in a case that could have wide-ranging implications beyond the state of Tennessee?
Well, thank you for having me, Jake. And obviously, this is a critical inflection point for transgender people across the country. We're coming off of an election season where transgender people played an outside role in people's consciousness in terms of the way in which we were situated as a threat to others. And when we look at the map of states that ban this type of evidence-based healthcare, we went from 0 states that had these bans in 2020 to now more than half the country. So before the court tomorrow,
Whatever. Actually, I do want you to hear this part.
I would say is nobody has to provide this medication to adolescents. These are not doctors being forced to provide this medication. These are doctors who are wanting to treat their patients in the best way that they know how, based on the best available evidence to us. And
you know what? We have more to say about this. We're up against it. Hold tight. We're going to talk to Cal Thomas. We're going to come back to this.
To explode.
We've got to come back to this. We have so much that we want to say. This is a one of those issues that transcends the news cycle, but it happens to be in the news cycle today. So hold tight. We're going to talk to Cal Thomas in a moment. Then we will come back to this at 6:46. Right now it's 6:24.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
6:37 here. It's a busy morning, and it just got busier as we have much more to say about the Supreme Court arguments that you're going to hear later this morning over Tennessee's decision to stop the authorized gender mutilation of children in the name of gender science and activism. Coming up at 7:05, Gordon Chang will give us the latest on South Korea. 7:35, Nick Minnock on Loudoun County politics. 8:05, Chuck Thies on D.C. Maryland power grab over the RFK Stadium site. And then at 8:35, May Mailman will wrap things up with the legal arguments we're going to hear in the Supreme Court. That's Julie Gunlock, isn't it? Yes, I recognize you. You're Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
I'm Larry O'Connor. And this, of course, is Wednesday at 6:35. So it's Cal Thomas. Good morning, Cal.
Good morning, you two. And breaking news, I'm identifying as a male today.
I appreciate that. The mustache sort of gives you away, but these days you can't really guess. Why are we rapping to Cal here? Oh, Cal had a birthday Monday. But, no, Michael, when a man reaches a certain age, they do not want to be reminded of their birthday. But that said, not many men live to your age, Cal, so happy birthday.
Oh, goodness.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm counting backwards now.
There you go. That's right.
Remember that? The Brad Pitt movie. Remember that? Well, he went the other way. I don't know.
It's like a mortgage reversal.
You reach the point where your birthday is T-minus. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, T-minus, yeah.
Listen, I appreciate you wanting to talk about the House COVID-19 panel. The summary report came out yesterday, and some of the findings from this House subcommittee, as you put it, were conspiracy theories just a minute and a half ago.
Yeah, I mean, anything government does, of course, is long. It's more than 500 pages. It won't even make a good movie. But everything that people like me and people like you were saying about this mask didn't work, social distancing didn't work, shutting down the schools was a very bad thing. It hurt the kids. It set them back. All of these things. There were a few good things in there, but all of this stuff, most of Fauci's business, I am science. You got to believe me. I'm the source of all truth. It all is bull. And as Big Daddy said in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, that's what Big Daddy says. It's bull. But we were told, people were fined. Some people went to jail. People in the military had their careers ended because they wouldn't take the vaccination. And same thing with climate change. All this stuff from government. The climate change in the 70s, we were going to freeze to death because of a glacier worldwide experience, and that didn't happen. Now we're all going to burn to death. And each time we're supposed to trust the science and adjust our lives accordingly. This is going to further reduce whatever faith people have in bureaucrats.
There has been one quick addition on that. There's been no cost to this, to what happened during the pandemic, for people losing their jobs, for kids, having learning disabilities and delays and suicidal thoughts and even suicide. I mean, there's been no cost to this. Will the media focus on this at all? I mean, to be honest with you, I heard nothing yesterday. I'm glad that we're talking about it with you, but will there be any focus on this? And for goodness sake, will we get any apologies from any of these people?
Well, as the old movie, love means never having to say you're sorry. Being in government means never having to say you're wrong. And nobody ever loses their job. I mean, what Reagan said, the only proof of eternal life in Washington is a government program. Nobody is held accountable, and so there's no incentive for doing right and taking another look at these things before coming out with all of these statements that affect every single American. I mean, yeah, there were people who died. It was a terrible tragedy and the rest, but the response ought to be the kind that actually works, and this didn't. And there are some good things in the report. I mean, okay, the vaccines seem to have worked for some people, but even Biden said, if you get the vaccines, you won't get COVID. Well, a lot of people who got the vaccines did get COVID, and they got more than once. So. You just can't trust these people.
But the committee did say there would be accountability. They said this should be held accountable, that should be accountable. But, of course, Congress doesn't have a whole lot of teeth when it comes to serving up accountability. So
they don't have a lot of other things at the other end, too.
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to be family-friendly. But you're right. So, I mean, is that where it ends? We got our report. The report is filed, duly noted, moving on now.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's always the same. Always the same. It never changes. In Washington, the script it never changes. But this is why Elon Musk and Ramaswamy are with this Doge thing. They want to come in and they want to get rid of some of these people. And I hope they fire while the iron is hot and do it. We've got to reduce the size and cost and especially the reach of government and get back to liberty, which was the intention of the founders. Smaller government for liberty.
Help me out on this, Cal Thomas, because this is your column on Monday, and I keep hearing from people like Dana Bash at CNN and other journalists and Democrats in this town that, listen, the legislative branch creates these agencies. They fund these agencies. The executive branch has no control. They have no choice. If Congress says, hey, spend $100 billion on this program this year, and the executive branch says, well, okay, we can do it for $1 million instead. Do they have to spend the $100 billion? Is that written into law that the executive branch is compelled to spend every penny that Congress tells them to spend?
Well, this has been going on for some time, this debate, Larry, about whether, let's say, something happens in a Democratic administration, and when the Republicans come in, they want to spend less and they don't want to spend what's been passed. But the real problem is the bureaucrats. Congress will pass a law, and then the bureaucrats decide how that law is going to be applied. And they may do things that were never the original intent of the law that was passed.
That is the problem. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, and you're right. This has been an ongoing argument, but this is the first time I've actually seen an administration that seems to be serious about stopping. These administrations say, vote for me, I'll be in the White House, I'll cut spending, and then they propose a budget that increases spending across the board. It seems like these guys are serious about it. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm naive.
I hope so. Well, it's going to take Congress, and of course, every member has their own little fiefdom.
Right.
You remember during the Base Realignment and Closing Commission, they were screaming and yelling, and these were World War II barracks and other things that had long outlived its usefulness. But it finally got through due to public pressure. And I think if these Doge guys, Musk and Ramaswamy, start with the most outrageous things, they'll have the public behind them, and then can go to the more serious stuff.
Cal Thomas, you will never outlive your usefulness for us. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go take my. Well, never mind.
Yeah. Go take a nap in your World War II bunker there. All right.
Thank you very much.
All right. I want to talk to you about the Good Feet store. Fall is here, and it's a time of year we take stock and think about all the things we're thankful for. I'm thankful for spending time with my family and my friends. I love it. And I'm thankful that my friends at the Good Feet store have helped thousands of people to live a better life, like me. I told you the story about how a few years ago I was training for a half marathon. It was right at the beginning of the pandemic, in fact, and I noticed I had this foot pain, and I couldn't train for a half marathon. I couldn't even walk around the block without pain. So I went to the Good Feet store. I got a free fitting. I got a test walk. They fit me with arch support systems. And then I was back on my feet. In fact, in weeks, I was training again. And I've run that half marathon since then. Thank you very much. This year, I'm going to train for the Marine Corps Marathon. So do yourself a favor and get yourself to the Good Feet store. It's Commander's Day at the Good Feet store in Woodbridge. This Saturday, Commander's Day at the Good Feet store in Woodbridge from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Meet and greet with former Washington Commanders. I'm guessing there'll also be some former Washington Redskin players there, too. And Major Tuddy. Major Tuddy's going to be there. There's nothing kosher about Major Tuddy, by the way, but you'll enjoy him. Enjoy Washington Commanders raffle prizes, free food, giveaways. Visit goodfeet.com, book your appointment today, or just stop by. Go see Major Tuddy and try the good feet feeling today. Something I go hog wild for Major Tuddy. I don't know about you. Well, because he's a swine of sorts. Please begin the traffic music. I beg you. Thank you. 6:45, WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes. First on the fives, Jamie Witten's in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.
0.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition? No.
Yeah.
I can't.
That's Ketanji Brown Jackson. Of course, she will be a justice sitting and hearing the arguments later this morning over this castration law in Tennessee, prohibiting the castration and gender mutilation of children there under the guise of transgender care. Maybe she should recuse herself from this, since clearly she is in no way qualified to render judgment on these laws. Again, Chase Strangio, ACLU, I believe born as a female, living life as a male yesterday on CNN.
I would say nobody has to provide this medication to adolescents. These are not doctors being forced to provide this medication. These are doctors who are wanting to treat their patients in the best way that they know how, based on the best available evidence to us. And
can I just ask, there's more to this, but Julie, have you ever heard lawyers advocate for doctors to have the choice to apply a bandage to an open wound? Listen, it's a broken limb. It's up to you whether you want to reset the bone and put it in a cast or not. If this truly is a medical necessity, then why on earth are you arguing that doctors, it's up to them if doctors want to provide this medical. If it truly is a medical necessity for children, shouldn't it be a compelled rule? Why should a doctor be able to opt out of something if it's a medical necessity? This person is destroying their argument on the face of it.
Excellent point, and you should be on the Supreme Court. But also, Larry, this is interesting too. Her claim, they're not being forced. I'm sorry, but parents are being forced. Yeah. There is a man in California who lost custody of his son because he would not affirm and would not allow his child to get medical intervention.
Mutilate your child or you will lose your child.
And we see this in school boards. They tried it in Virginia to criminalize parents who deny their children, their new name and their new gender and all of this. So it is required.
You need to hear more from this person, Chase Strang.
These are young people who may have known since they were 2 years old exactly who they are, who suffered for 6-7 years.
I'm sorry.
Oh, my God.
Since they were 2 years old, they knew that God put them in the wrong body, which is such a warped vision of God in the first place. But it's
sickening.
These issues are so transcendent and so important for us to discuss. And I want to reiterate, England has already said that they're not going to allow this for children.
Larry, I know we're tight. Tight, but I just want to say, Tapper just sat there. I take every opportunity to rag on Tapper. That guy just sat there.
Yep.
He let this woman who can we just talk about her name? Strangio? I mean, is
Chase Strangio with a beard and a very nice looking suit, by the way. I mean, he dresses better than I do. Or
Tapper just let her prattle on. Yeah. No questioning, no challenging.
May Mailman, director of Independent Women's Law Center, will talk about the law aspect, the idea that this is an equal protection, the idea that Congress and Abraham Lincoln, when passing the 14th Amendment, did it so that eventually children will be able to have their perfectly healthy organs mutilated by doctors 160 years later. 6:54.